webinar, and after that, we'll be having a valedictory function. So now I request Assistant Professor Vinod Sonawni to please introduce about the
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon to everyone present here. I'm extremely overwhelmed to get this opportunity to welcome you all for this last session. We all have assembled here today to motivate and cherish young minds present among us. Apart from this, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome our chairman of this session, Professor Dr. J. Jagannathan, Central University of Jammu, and our speaker of this session, Mr. Amit Oza, Customer Shipping and Trading Services. The sub-theme of today's session is concept of onshoring of shipping and shipbuilding related services and its relevance to India. But before we start with our lecture on this sub-theme, I would like to introduce the chairman of this session. Dr. J. Jagannathan is a senior assistant professor in the Department of National Security at the Central University of Jammu and Kashmir. His research interests include trade and trade routes in ancient India, foreign and security policy of India, China in South Asia, trade and connectivity in Asia, comparative regionalism, geopolitics, and border studies, Jammu and Kashmir. He is using technology extensively in teaching and research activities, both curricular and extracurricular activities. He writes for national and regional newspapers, including
Thank you, Mr. Sorry to interruption. Due to Mr.
and
Vinod,
also
sorry, Mr.
okay.
Vinod, please. This is brief. Let it be brief due to paucity of time. I think we are
Yes,
already
sir.
running
Yes,
short of time. Yeah.
yes, sir. Yes,
So, with your permission, may I start this session?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. And it has been a enlightening session. The previous session was so enlightening. I think we couldn't able to move forward. And I've been given a tough task for moderating a session where I don't have a domain knowledge or technical knowledge. So I will be playing a role of moderator as well as a timekeeper for this session. So we have the last but the least very interesting session, concept of onshoring and shipbuilding related services, and what are the relevances to India. So and we have with us a very eminent speaker, Mr. Amit Oza, from Astama Shipping and Trading Services, and he is going to enlighten us or give us that how the concept of onshoring, particularly in the shipbuilding services, would be an irrelevant for today's for my layman understanding about the onshoring shipping building services is concerned, we have been being it's a commercial or warships. Mostly we relying on this off. Now in today's context, we are able and equipped to deal with onshoring, and here views this topic. Introduction that may I request Mr. Amit Uza to be brief, and you have 10 minutes, and then we'll have a 5 minutes discussion. Over to you, Mr. Amit. Mr. Amit, you can unmute yourself. We are not able to hear you. Could you please unmute?
so we are not able to hear you.
Yeah, still it's you are not unmuted, I guess. Can you just unmute yourself?
So he's unmute, but I guess the speaker of your headphone is not working. It might be the problem. No, sir, you're yet not audible.
Hello, is it
Hello. So you're audible, but Amit Oza sir is not audible yet.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm telling him. I think he's has left, and I think he will be joining back.
Okay.
Snehal, can you just call Amit and find out what is this issue?
Yes, I'll do that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, please.
Just logged in again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Amit. Yeah,
Sorry about
perfect.
that.
No issues.
Snail, can I please request you to share the presentation? I'm not able to share it from my end. I'd sent it to you yesterday.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll do that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can start, Amit, now. Meanwhile, she will be presenting your slides.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So at the outset, thank you very much, Captain Naravne, for this invitation. I actually have a very short presentation. Most of the points that I would be covering have been covered in some form or the other by previous speakers. So I'll just focus on a couple of important slides which have not been covered earlier. Can we just quickly have the presentation if it's possible, Snail?
You'll be brief. 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'll finish it within 10 minutes. I just need the
Okay, great.
presentation.
Fine.
Oh.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Can we just go to the first slide, please? Just very quickly. So I hope everybody can see the slide. Maybe you can maximize it. This is actually a very interesting slide which shows the number of active shipyards over the years. So as you can see, the number of active shipyards which actually have orders and which are actually under operation varied widely in the last 2 decades, and that's because the credit boom which happened in 2003 distorted valuations in shipping markets, whose impact is still being felt. If you look at the smaller graph within the slide, you'd see that till 2002 2003, China was nowhere in the shipbuilding scene, and Japan and Korea dominated the shipbuilding scene. It was only during the boom of 2003 and 2004, where there was availability of credit and plenty of money available, that this particular phenomena encouraged shipbuilding because of the high markets, and China grew much above Japan and other competitors and established a number of shipyards due to the easy availability of credit. Can we go to the next slide quickly? So I'll just skip this slide. Just skip this slide, please. It's about the Indian. Just skip this slide as well. Skip this slide as well. So this is also something which is known about the current state of Indian shipbuilding, the private sector. Can you just skip this as well, please? So what are the key issues that we have? This has again been discussed extensively in the past 2 days. We have the problem of availability of capital, scale and expertise at that scale. There are internal issues, labor issues, import of components, supply chain issues which have been spoken about, lack of shipping parks. Most of the stuff has to be imported. Importantly, we have a disconnection between the international shipping market and opportunities. I've personally attended a number of international conferences related to shipping, and I do not find a very high representation of Indian shipbuilding in these forums, or even with ship owners that we're in touch with. There is definitely a lack of connect with the international shipping markets as far as Indian shipbuilding is concerned. There is an even bigger lack of financial connect between the international financial markets and the Indian shipping markets and the shipbuilding markets because of the restrictions and regulations, which we'll speak about. Can you go to the next slide, please? So earlier in the session, Mr. Das Gupta and then Mr. Hariraj spoke about FDI in shipbuilding, and as you can see, many of the Asian countries have used this particular route very successfully. In fact, Philippines is now the 5th largest shipbuilding country in the world, which has more than 600,000 tons of installed capacity. You have Hanjin, Capel, and Senshui. In fact, the Senshui yard in Cebu is bigger than the yard in Japan. So this is again a very successful route for countries to kickstart shipbuilding. Of course, Philippines is much smaller than India, and they couldn't capitalize, and they couldn't have their own industry to the scale that we can. But this is a good way to kickstart your own industry. Next slide, please. This is again where Vietnam has come in, where they've focused more on the specialized sector. So you have Ward, which is a Norwegian company which has yards in Vietnam. Similarly, Damen, which has yards worldwide. So European yards with specialized vessels are also looking to have overseas bases. They have bases in Qatar, UAE, South Africa, depending on the local market and requirement. So this is again something which we can definitely tap in. Can you go to the next slide, please? The next slide, please, Snell. Yeah. So again, this slide basically talks of the connect, the global connect, that you can't look at shipbuilding in isolation. You need to look at the markets. You need to look at the cargo transportation. You need to look at the scrapping. You need to look at the order book, and then the construction capacity. Next slide, please. Looking a bit deeper into the global shipping markets and the connect, we all know about the shipping cycle. Yards need a very strong market connect, and Mr. Yo spoke about China investing 25 to 30 years in developing an understanding of the markets and connecting with the markets with a proper strategy and planning. So you need a very deep understanding of shipping markets, trades, derivatives, and its players to know as to where the shipping cycle is at that point in time, when to invest, when to hold back, when to actually go in aggressively. You need a large network of specialized brokers and market players who are actually assisting you. You have RS Plato, which is now part of Clarkson's Plato. You have Paranto, many large specialized consultants and brokers who specialize in new building and getting associated with yards and marketing them. You need a very close relationship with international banks, financiers, funds, etc. And of course, you need special relationship with certain clients who are your core clients. So for example, if you have certain ship owners who always order at a particular yard in Japan for a number of years, you have the Chinese now building these special relationships as well. And Mr. Yo spoke about it in his presentation. Can you go on to the next one, please? This is actually about the financing of vessels which are being built. After the crash of 2009, China had these shipyards, but obviously the number of orders had started to fall, and they had this problem of what to do with the ships. And they were very scared of traditional funding where they simply act as debtors. So they've come up with this concept of Chinese leasing, which is now very popular, and increasing a number of owners are now using this, where the buyer of the vessel actually novates the order to a financial entity who then de facto becomes the owner of the vessel, and the vessel is then bareboat chartered back to the lessee, who then becomes the commercial owner for all practical purposes. And at the end of the 15-year period, the ship is then given back to the lessee, and he takes the residual risk. Of course, the seller pays a charter hire which is equivalent to the cost of the ship plus the agreed component of profit or interest, which is agreed with the SPV provider or the lessor. The next slide, please. So, of course, I'm sure all of you know that after 2010, after the bust, the Chinese balance sheet was about $3 trillion, and the American balance sheet was increased by $3 trillion by all the extra money they had to pump in. In other words, there was a transfer of value from the US economy to the Chinese economy, and they've deployed these funds very well. And in 2010, when they started this program, they started giving credits to various leading ship owners around the world to build in their yards by using the Chinese leasing method. The next slide, please. So as you can see, China Exim is now the world's largest ship finance provider with a portfolio of 20 billion. After the crash, the traditional European debt providers have withdrawn because they suffered large losses. You have Bank of China as the third largest provider. You have ICBC leasing. So as you can see, the Chinese banks are going up the chain. The Koreans caught on later, and as you can see, K Exim, Korea Exim has also started a leasing company. So the ship leasing, Chinese ship leasing is now actually the most preferred way for bulk carriers and tankers to fund themselves. The next slide, please. So what are our advantages? We have a very large forex reserves. So we have the hard cash. We have excellent relationship with the current leaders in shipbuilding. In fact, it's predicted that after a couple of years, Japan would cease to be a major shipbuilding country due to the cost considerations. There's a robust shipbuilding policy in the center, and at state level also we have seen that. More importantly, we have a lot of experience with bonds and leasing. As an economy, we are very mature. We have a stock exchange. We have complicated instruments, and we have experience of trading them in international markets now. There's of course a large supply of trained manpower. There's now an increased focus in the last 5 years on shipping, and of course the Indian shipping diaspora. About we spoke about almost all shipping companies. I saw the list which Hari had put up, and out of the 5 companies that he listed, 3 of them are controlled by Indians: Anglo Eastern, Fleet, and Synergy. They may not be in India, but they're controlled by people of Indian origin. So that's a big strength which can be tapped into. The next slide, please. I'll very quickly go through this. This is a new initiative by the central government where they've created a financial free zone by the way of an act called IFSCA Act, where they've created a regulator who can actually create a financial SEZ. The only condition to be in that SEZ is that you can't deal in Indian rupees. So for all practical purposes, you are considered outside India from a financial point of view. So no GST is applicable. There's a 10-year income tax holiday as well on the assets. The problem is that after the crisis, most of the Indian banks have resorted to balance sheet funding. So there's again little understanding of shipping markets or the markets related to those activities. So the Gift City IFSC initiative is an attempt to try and get the businesses which have gone offshore due to funding and taxation issues to get them back into India. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in an ideal world, this could be the way forward. We kickstart the Indian shipbuilding industry with the help of bringing in friendly foreign players to start their yards here. The Indian banking industry, the Indian finance industry, the Indian capital markets understand and appreciate and start understanding it. And there are joint ventures formed with overseas firms, and overseas firms also take minority shares in Indian yards. There's overseas debt and Indian debt and financing into the system. And at the same time, using the GIFT platform, Indian ship leasing companies start providing funding to international shipping companies. Again, they can be funded by a combination of local and overseas capital and financing. And this would then give an impetus in terms of getting the orders into the yards created. So just very quickly through this thing. Thank you very much. That's all I had to say. Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Amit. It's more informative as well as insightful and very brief. Thank you very much. And now we have 5 minutes for discussion. Then we'll have a validity session. If there is any question, please raise your question and be brief and to the point. If there is a comment, just be brief, not elaborate comments.
I don't think anybody has any comments. Thank you.
Any questions? Sir, would you like to comment, sir? That's sir, would you like to comment?
So thank you, Mr. Jagannathan. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all.
Thank you,